I know we're going to dive into cell phones, and I think I imagine that you and I probably have like a bit of inner turmoil. In one sense, we can agree that, uh, the merits or the digital addiction, phone addiction is a real thing. Yet we promote ourselves and our businesses
That's the easy part to
digitally.
manage. Yeah, because
Yeah,
we help other athletes to do that, but we just do it from laptops, but we schedule it instead of randomly do it. And there's the difference,
sure.
right?
I want to get into that, but I thought that we could start
Yep.
because I've done this is a subject for me that's been a big part of my own life. Just recognizing, um, if you had to ask me like 2 years ago if I was addicted to my phone, I would have said absolutely not. 12 months ago, I started to recognize that maybe I was, or that it was at least problematic.
Is that when I showed up in Michigan and half the coaches put away their phones when I walked in the
No,
room?
you know what? It was before that, but I think it was so timely when we connected. I was
Oh,
like, yeah, this is like. I think if you had asked me before that, like if you had reached out and said, "Hey, I want to come talk to a bunch of coaches about phone addiction," I'm like, why? Like this is a coaching conference, totally
it's hurting
irrelevant.
them too.
But the timing and just maybe the self reflection of my own life was like, yeah, I think this is actually a really important topic. But what I thought we could do,
Sure.
because I sense, just going back over the talk you did for us last year, there's going to be a lot of language and terminology that
Okay.
people will be familiar with but may not totally understand. So with that in mind, how do you define addiction?
Addiction is anything that rewards the brain chemically, right? So anything that rewards the brain, is that dopamine? Yes. Is that gambling that revs adrenaline up? Yes. Is it alcohol? Yes. Is it sugar? Yes. Addiction can be any one of those things that gives the brain the reward it's seeking. The chemical reward, right? Right. Then there's behavior. That's different with phones. But addiction means I gotta look. I gotta look. The notifications check our brain and it goes, I want the dopamine. I want the dopamine.
So would it be accurate to say, because I think we think of like, phones you're consuming with your eyes, alcohol you're consuming, your mouth, but it's really, if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's all tapping into the same functions within the brain. It's
Right.
still tapping into the same sources that are
Yeah. The
creating
same
that
addiction
addiction.
center. That we call it the addiction center, right?
Got it.
Right.
What is okay, you mentioned dopamine. What is dopamine?
So dopamine is a chemical, or what do you want to call it, a hormone in the brain that is produced more when we look at our phones, when we get soothed by something on our phone. So when we check a notification, the dopamine surges through our nervous system to our brain, and the brain puts out in the pituitary gland more dopamine, and that surges our heart rate and ticks off our nervous system. So kids don't know how to control that, right? They'll just keep looking at it all day and go, this feels good. This feels
It's
good.
kind of like the rats in the cage. They're just going to keep drinking out of the,
Right.
water
It's the
bottle.
same as cocaine. You're just getting
Same way.
micro doses of cocaine.
And
Right.
so would it be fair to say that in addictions such as alcohol or drugs, is dopamine still present in those forms of addiction?
Right. Yeah.
And I think why this is important, because I didn't, in my mind, say drug and alcohol addiction and this concept of like these were apples and oranges, but it would seem to be that it's really just
Addiction's
it's
addiction.
all exactly.
Right. However,
Um
I will give a however.
okay.
Drugs, heroin, yes, they're going to be a little bit harder, right? It's harder for the system. When we separate ourselves from these things, right? We separate ourselves from these things. We don't have the urge to actually go on as much. If we train our brains and have habits, the dopamine comes down. And that's why our athletes go out there and they're faster, stronger, and they hit harder in hockey than other teams because dopamine makes us dopey. So we
Yeah.
bring down the dopamine. Cortisol comes down with that too,
What's
right?
cortisol? What's cortisol?
Cortisol is another, or it's our stress hormone. When we get upset, when we get angry, when we get worried, right? We worry about the future, so we do the what ifs. If we are worried about the past, we dwell. right? So that's where depression comes from. So if we are worried, which the majority of 85% of the kids that come through here have a form of anxiety, but when we look into it through assessments, we actually find that they just don't have the mental skills to cope. As soon as we give them the skills, they're like, bye, see you later. I'm good. Right?
And how do screens or phones, affect cortisol levels? Like, is it going
When
up or down?
up. And
Okay.
so every time you touch your phone, which I think the average now is 176 times a day for a
You
kid
should,
under
yeah, I was
18,
gonna add, that's just a crazy statistic.
right? And it's around 176. Now, I've seen kids 320. I've
Yeah.
seen adults that are more, and they are dysfunctional. They can't function with that, right? You can't, your body can't. It's almost like your brain is attached to your nervous system. Every time you zap it, the brain, 176 times, your brain is like, "Can you please stop zapping me and bugging me? I can't manage this." And then you see, I see, coaches see moodiness, fatigue, tired, violence. They can't cope with this extra cortisol and dopamine is what I'm saying.
Got it. Last term, I kept reading about blue light and that there was a difference between, I guess, the screens that you may watch on a TV versus what you're seeing on your phone. Can you explain what blue light is?
Blue light is the type of light that is coming from your phone, especially when it's dark outside and you're in a dark room. It makes us actually feel, now there's some science saying, and I will go on both sides of this. Blue light, yes, it can make you stay up, but it's not doing the damage phones are really doing. Okay, the phone damage, destructivism is coming from what the kids are seeing online, what the kids are watching online, what comments they're seeing. That's the danger. Blue lights, yeah, they'll keep you up. So just tone your light down, right? Right? Or go to a laptop, watch a TV and leave the room. So it's about going back to kind of practical habits. So when I go into like an NHL club and we do a talk, we go through all the different things that we can do to work from a laptop on travel. How do you get to bed at night? I got athletes that can't go to bed. They're flying, right?
I believe it. Yeah.
So they have to get off their phones. So this is so we read the Canadian dictionary to go to bed, book or dictionary, something to really get you, but the phones have got to be out of the rooms because that stimulates your brain because they want to be on it. And that's for all athletes, right? It keeps us awake, right?
So it would seem to me, like, with all that being said, that, when, the interesting thing about phones is that this is something we've all, lived through, in the sense of, like, I mean, if you're our age, you can remember the first time you saw a cell phone and it was the size of a shoebox. And we've kind of lived through this evolution, which has just been accelerated with technology, right? And it would seem to me that it's almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing, because my sense is, nobody, with our perception of what addiction was, i.e., drugs and alcohol, this concept of you could get addicted to technology or this little phone was so foreign. And that's why it just, so it didn't seem, the threat of giving it to our kids didn't seem real. In fact, I think probably for most parents, I know, than just conversations we have at our house, was like, it seemed, more than anything, it seemed like you're maybe doing your kids a favor or a service, handing them a smartphone. So when did it when did it occur to you that these things, these phones, were going to be problematic, particularly for kids?
2002.
Really?
2002. Yes.
Where were you at that time?
I was teaching high school. I was also coaching high level volleyball. That's what my sport really I came from. And I also coached rowing, but I was also rowing and I'm like, I can't watch this phone. They were like the Nokia and the flip
Like
one.
the flip phones?
Like what's the first, anyway, we had them. And
I
then
think
as a
yeah,
teacher, I'm like, all phones are sticking in my box. They're going in my box on my desk
yeah.
and you guys don't have them.
And
So
this
I
is in your
managed,
class, in a
yeah,
classroom
I
setting.
managed them
Yeah.
right away, 2002. Because here's the problem, Aaron. When you're a teacher and you have 27 brains in your classroom or 27 athletes that you're trying to develop, you can't compete with dopamine. It is a non, uh, it's a challenge. You can't do it. So I left. I said, if you don't get rid of them, you're going to see education change and become more violent. and the behavior is going to get worse. Now, this is also what happened in sports, right? We've allowed behavior to come into our systems and our associations. And that's why we've partnered with lots of hockey associations, because we go in there and help them with behavior, because behavior is not linked to performance, right? As in terms of good behavior is linked to high performance, bad behavior
Yeah.
is linked to regression.
And when you say behavior, do you mean things like sitting in a classroom with your phone on your desk and or sitting in a dressing room with your phone,
Yeah.
within arm's reach?
Yeah. 2 hours before a practice in a game is the absolute worst time you can ever be on a phone, no matter what sport you're doing, because it's
And
going to
and
spike
now would
your
that apply to
dopamine and
most
cortisol.
anything that you're doing in life that requires focus
Focus.
or attention? Would it sort of
Correct.
apply? Like, yeah,
Correct. Like if
makes
I'm
total
going
sense.
into a big meeting, I tend to make sure, well, I have my notifications off most of the day. And I make phone calls for a certain time so I can be available, and that's usually at my kids' practice. Like, I'm available in there, or I'm talking to coaches or whoever, but I make myself available for calls between like this time and this time, and it's on, but I feel better when I'm not getting notified. Like I get revved up myself, right? I'm like, stop bugging me. I mean, it could be 100 times a day, but I'm glad I shut them off, because it takes my dopamine down, it takes my cortisol down, and I feel more calm. And so I can work from a place of calm, and athletes can work from a beast mode, because phones put them into yellow on their traffic light. And if we are in yellow on our traffic lights, the decision maker, the cognitive processing won't happen.
Okay, time out. What's a traffic light?
Okay, traffic light, let's describe that as your emotional, functional traffic light as a human being. If
Okay,
you're in red and angry, you're not going to make good decisions on the ice. In fact, I would bet
sure.
you'd end up in the penalty box, or you're going to end up suspended, just by the stats that I've
Yeah.
seen. If you're
Okay.
in yellow, I would almost guarantee that you're not thinking, you're not communicating, you're not playing, you're not using your game strategy, like hockey IQ, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be depleted. Green, love green. Green means go. Green means confidence. Green means good. Green means you're under control. Because we teach our athletes three things. Are you calm, confident, and in control before a game? How do you mentally lock in on that before you leave your house? Because when you get to the rink, there's too much distraction. It might not help you stay in green, because our goal is to stay in green all day. It's not going to happen, but we try, right?
How many of the athletes, Larissa, that you work with recognize that the phone is a problem?
All of them.
They do recognize it. They're mindful of this.
Well, because I think we do a great job at teaching them chemically what it does. So behavior, how does it change your behavior to your coach? Are you focused? Because the first 22 minutes of a practice, I can almost guarantee coaches, you're going to be getting their attention back. And it's really hard if they've just been on a phone. So you've almost wasted 22 minutes of every practice if we're allowing phones before practices and games, right? So the brain takes 22 minutes to refocus, the
How
hippocampus and
many? Sorry,
everything.
can you repeat that? How long does
22
it take to
minutes.
read?
So if
Got it.
you
Okay.
just were on your phone making a bet and then you're jumping out for first period, kiss it goodbye. Really, you're
Wow.
not going to play at your top speed. You're not going to play at your top level. You're not going to, and you can be delusional and think it doesn't affect you, but it will. And it will in more higher top performers, actually. Right?
So, okay. So 2002, you're a teacher. You recognize these phones
Yep.
are an issue, but the phones, the technology becomes a lot more addictive. At
Highly.
what point does this become, a primary focus for you professionally?
Probably around 10, 15 years ago, I was working I owned a Pilates studio, and I had a bunch of different NHL guys that would come back every summer and do Pilates with me, because their backs would be wrecked and their knees would be wrecked, and I'm like pregnant, and they helped me off the floor to get them. They were great guys, but they're like, we don't come for the Pilates, we come for like the education and the psychology. I was like, so we taught them how to control their brains, but how phones are distracting and leading your brain down a path to yellow, right? And you're actually sabotaging your decision maker. Your decision maker is your contract, it's your money, it's your performance. So why would you do that? And so that age group, now being that they're my age now, Um, right? Drastically changed. They put their phones away. They put them away at night. I mean, here you've got Quinn Hughes, who's been very vocal about not using his phone. He feels better, he says. He feels more focused, and he says, I feel more calm. That is something that we will hear all the time: calm, confident, and in control. Phones make us in 30 seconds question who we are. Am I fast enough, good enough, pretty enough, smart enough? And why isn't anybody liking my stuff? So it makes us go right into yellow on our traffic light and hate ourselves. It's not cool. So to get from yellow to green before you play in a minute, it's hard for the brain to do that. Hard.
For sure. And I'll maybe share this is my experience from through a coaching lens, through leading young people with phones. So um you talk about the flip phone. So I'm
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
coaching at UBC, the men's program. So this
Oh, no.
is up to 2010.
Okay.
And at that time I would say like smartphones were just becoming a thing. Probably a lot of our players
2007.
were still.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Okay,
first
so I would say
edition.
at this time a lot of our kids are still using kids. They're like in their early 20s, but they're using the majority still have flip phones. And so do that, um, and then I don't coach junior again until 2013. I coach a team called the Richmond Sockeyes.
Yes.
It's a junior B team. We have a great year. We win nationals, but we're
Great.
not on buses. At that point, we're a league where it's in and around the lower mainland of Vancouver, and kids are
Okay.
driving themselves. So you don't have that interaction
You're
away
not on a
from the
bus
from the rink.
collectively. Okay.
Exactly. So and at that point, the whole phone thing probably isn't really on my radar. So from 2013, I I'm over in China a bunch, working in grassroots program with the Canucks, etc. Not coaching a team, but then in 2017, I get asked from BC Hockey. It's called the BC Major Midget League, and so it's a provincial wide league. And there was a team where they needed a coach to jump in midseason for various reasons. They said, "Would you be willing to come in and help this team out to finish the year?" And it worked out, so I agreed to do it. And so there's this gap of, effectively it's a 7-year gap of working with athletes. So in this league, you do get on a bus, you do travel. So two specific things happen where I'm like, holy shit, we're playing a different game now. So the first one is we get on our first road trip. I think it was the second weekend I'm with the team. And we're going up to Prince George. And there's a period in Prince. So it's about from Vancouver, it's about a 9-10 hour drive. And there's a chunk of space on that drive where there's no cell reception. Our bus breaks down where there's no cell reception, and it's cold and it's wintertime, but it's not like crazy cold. So, anyways, the bus driver has to like radio in or whatever he has to do to get the bus, but it's like, okay, it's going to be like, I don't know, it was like 4 hours or something crazy until the new bus is going to come.
Okay.
Our kids, I'm watching them, they don't know what to do. Like, they don't even, like, it's not even occurring to them, like, maybe we could just talk with each other. Like it's
Panic
not even occurring to them. And I'm
instantly.
watching them. I'm like, guys, like there's a forest. There's like go find something to do. Have some fun. And meanwhile, like so the time goes on. Eventually, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they start running around the forest. And next thing you know, they're interacting. They're having fun. And our assistant coach is like, "Hey, like, do you think anything is bad going to happen in the forest? Like, should we pull them back?" I'm like, "No, no, no, no. Like, they're having fun. Let them do their thing."
Let them go.
I would point, we ended up having a really good year. I would point to that moment of time when they're like, hey, we can just hang out with each other and talk to each other and play a game and
Yep.
figure shit out as a tipping point. Second thing, the next road trip, we're in Kelowna.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
for anybody that coaches like junior hockey in Kelowna, you're familiar with there's a Sandman Hotel there
Oh,
that
yeah.
everybody's stayed at multiple times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we're at the Sandman Hotel, and I'm in a room with my assistant coach. And I'm like, hey, go do a room check. He's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Just go knock on everybody just to make sure everybody's in their room. They're in before curfew." So he does the room check and he comes back. He's like, "Hey, one of the kids is missing from his room, and there's another room where they're not answering the knock." And I'm like, "Okay." So we wander down to the hotel. Turns out there's a girl in the room, and the one player from the other room is not there. He's hiding in the shower. So of course we come and we like, "Hey, look, she's out here. Where's your mom and dad?" We deal with this. Sit down with the players, and I'm like, "Guys, like, how did you connect? Like, how did you meet this girl?" And they don't want to say anything. I'm like, "Guys, like, just this is where you're honest. Tell me what was going on." And they're like, Tinder. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, I've never used a dating app just because I wasn't a part of that. And I'm like, in my mind, Tinder's a thing that's just for adults. And I'm like, you use
They all
Tinder?
do.
And I'm like,
They're all using
and
it.
I'm like, how did you guys do? And they're like, coach, like she was on it too. Like this was a mutually,
Yeah, yeah, they're all on it.
and I was just like, dear God, like I'm in a different
Welcome to
universe.
the digital age.
Exactly. So that's my story. And I just realized like, holy cow, like we need to manage this and we need to set up, we need to talk about it and we need to set up some
Expectations,
guidelines because
boundaries, rules, done. It's easy,
yeah,
right? As soon as you
yeah.
do that, good to go. Like, as soon as we put those into, now we're being asked to put them into hockey associations, soccer associations. Larissa, what are the best phone strategies for this age group, and a travel group as a coach? What should I do? We have those kits, the toolkits for the coaches. We have talks for parents because as soon as we educate with our sport ecosystem package, they will actually be calmer and feel better. Like, parents want to change this. They just need the tools to do it. And coaches want to be very connected to this athlete, but we have to use more psychology in coaching because behavior is the barrier, not X's and O's, right? So there's where coaches are. This is why I think we work so well with coaches right now, is because we give them behavioral strategies and tools to connect with this kid who doesn't come with them.
So I'm assuming that whether you're working with a group of athletes or a team in the National Hockey League or Major Junior or
Yep.
down to the youth
Yep.
levels,
Yep.
that part of the exercise is here. I mean, you just said it that don't be on your phone for 2 hours before the game or practice. So
Simple.
part of this exercise has to be we're gonna have to put the phone away. How much pushback do you get from say the athletes and or the parents to say, oh no, like we need the
None.
phone? Really? Okay,
None.
that's encouraging.
Like, I'm working with the Dallas Stars hockey or elite hockey club right now. I'm teaching every kid's team from U13 to 18.
And do they all have like U13? Do they all have phones?
I don't, I think yes. And it's been amazing. The parents are supportive. Eric Silverman's freaking phenomenal.
He's a good dude. Yeah, we work with him.
Awesome. And so implementing them, he has seen changes in the players, and these kids are killing it because they're calmer and they're showing up ready instead of drained. Because remember, let's talk about the draining that happens in the brain when we go on them. You're going to show up and you're going to be a zombie and you can't play. So the traveling component of phones is huge, makes huge impact. I said, if you want to win, stay off your phone. It's that. And then they see the difference. They feel it. It's a feeling.
So when you talk about traveling, what? Because again, and this is I'm speaking like through layman's terms here, but one of the things I've learned about addiction is one of the things you have to replace it, or that seems to be a strategy amongst all addictions. So
Right.
if they're not on their phones when they're on the bus, the plane, airport, etc., what are you replacing it with?
Awesome. Good question. Several things. I want them to be playing cards. I want them to, they can play whatever cards they want. Go back to playing cards, or if some coaches are putting one movie on for all of them, that's it. Going back to the, because we usually just want to watch what we want to watch. But he goes, if you want to have a team that's not ready to play when you show up, let them go on your phones.
Okay, so it's so funny you say that. So third thing with that story I referenced with the team, I show up on the first bus trip and I've got a bunch of DVDs and I'm like, I'm going to be the cool coach, and they're like, what are those?
I
And I'm
know.
like, oh,
And
we're
you
going to
get
watch a movie because that's and they're like, yeah, we're all going to watch a movie, our own movie. And I was like, what happened to the bus trips? Used to be so much fun, and they
just
were just like,
right. So
yeah,
bringing back games, even if you play poker, I don't
community.
care. Talking actually relaxes the brain, but here's the cool thing that we are losing in hockey. The inability to communicate with our lines is decreasing. Communicate our line mates, our lines. So our D partners and our line, that communication is breaking down in hockey, soccer, everywhere, but it happens. Hockey is a fast sport. You need to be able to really communicate very quickly and make decisions quickly. The puck travels faster than a human. Make a decision in 3 decisions in less than half a second. That's crazy, right? But the brain is now. Here's the really sad part, Aaron. The brain sees what's going on in hockey, but the body can't. The processing is stuck. And so now we're kind of behind by 5, 8 seconds. The body can't catch up to the brain.
I'm sorry, I've got so many questions, but
Yeah.
is what you're saying a way of sort of saying that like reading body language or facial expressions, and that sort of communication is going like kids are just
All
they've
down,
lost that ability.
all weaker.
Yeah,
So executive functioning skills. So we teach those as
got it.
well.
Okay.
So how to
Yeah.
talk to a scout, how to put your phones away before you go out, how to shake their hand. Hey, may I have a minute of your time, sir? I'd really like to learn about your program. I'm so and so. I'm a forward. Do you have a minute? Be confident, social, and have that prepared speech. And now we've got kids who are like getting multiple offers because they're out there socializing instead of zoned in, right?
So you've mentioned confidence
Oh yeah.
a bunch of times. Can you talk about so like the whole attention part? Like that seems like an easy dot to connect. Can you talk about how phones affect confidence?
Yes. Okay, so let's pretend you and I just went on our phones. Okay, we went
Yeah.
on to social media. Okay.
Mm,
And after 10 minutes of scrolling, I would take your heart rate and I would
yeah.
ask you, "Hey, Aaron, how's it going? Like, you feel
Have
good?" And
people done this?
you'd be like, "Huh?" You kind of feel like, "Huh?" Well,
Yeah.
dopamine is at its highest, and so is cortisol. So you're going to be like a zombie. You're going to be
Got it.
slower for a little bit. So when you ask your kids to put away the laundry and do stuff, they kind of look up and they're like, "Huh?" That's the brain. That's total change. It's dopamine.
All I can think about is my 6-year-old watching cartoons on a Saturday morning, and it's just be like, "Hey, it's probably like what?" Like probably the yeah.
What?
Okay.
That?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
right. So, but we'll take this one step further. Now we're seeing comments. Now we're looking at things that are perfect from everybody else. They're not our real day. They're they're all polished photos. They're all our perfect and these perfect things are all displayed to a child, six, let's just say the undeveloped brain. That's the key here. They're looking at this going, who am I? What's my identity? Like I grew up, I was talking to Eric Lindros the other day, but we grew up finding out who we were. Okay. We would play outside 6 hours a day, and then we play hide and go seek and try and hide from our parents and not go inside. We were playing all the time. We were not on phones. We played three sports each, and then we were outside. Now it's inside 6 hours a day, and you're only outside for three. That is not good. Like that is not good. Diabetes is about to triple or something by 2032. So let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to so confidence is directly linked to scrolling, and your confidence within 30 seconds depletes because you don't feel good enough, strong enough, fast enough, handsome enough, pretty enough. Your times aren't good. You didn't score, and then there's the whole bullying factor that happens. So
Okay. So
the
I
brain
want
just
to ask.
explodes.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
go.
sorry for keep interrupting. This is just it's
No,
so
just keep going. No,
fascinating, and
I'm
I
good.
think that all of us
Don't
can
even
relate.
don't even
But I think like so my brain goes to, okay, well, that probably affects maybe like the player that's not the star player. But based on all your experience, like the best player on the team, are they susceptible to this same
absolutely.
sort of drain of
Yep.
confidence? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. It
Crazy.
doesn't it does not matter. There are people who are more resilient and have coping mechanisms to just say, it's just bull crap. I can deal with this. They probably have a stronger self identity, confidence, and coping mechanisms. To the majority of 80% of the kids, they don't come with these coping skills, self talk, and helping them to stop negative self talk. They can't stop this spiraling down effect that happens in their brain. So then adrenaline and cortisol spike, and then their stomachs feel like crap. It's an actual chemical reaction. But our brains, it's a two thing, like it's a physical and a mental, right? When we look at our phones, it's both now. That is messed up.
Okay. So you just mentioned, you said 80%.
You know, they,
During the talk you gave it at our TCS Live last year,
yeah,
you referenced that 84% of kids are addicted to their phones. And I think like I
which is
remember being in
higher
the
now.
audience and I was
It's
like
higher now.
I knew this was a thing, but that number was staggering. Can you maybe compare that to like the percentage of people that might be addicted to say again drugs and alcohol or those types of
I don't
things?
know if I can. I don't think I can make that addiction, except for I will state that I've seen from the Ontario Medical Association, the American
Yeah.
Adult Psychological Association, that they're on the rise.
And I
That's
would just say
all.
that just
I
I
don't.
think
I can't speak to those numbers, but when I speak to physicians, they're all on the rise. Drug addiction, prescription addiction, is on the rise too.
Got it. Got it. And I sort of feel like this is a we're kind of in this midst of it's like all these things are connected because as we know when you take away people's confidence, self-worth, etc., they're more susceptible to other forms of addiction. So it just
Right.
seems like we're in this negative flywheel of, as you say, bad behavior. If we had a mulligan with this whole phone thing and we go back in time machine and say, you know what, we think these things are going to be maybe not so great for society, but especially kids, when would be the appropriate time to hand kids or anybody, at what age should people get access to a smartphone where maybe their brain is developed, and that they could say, okay, you're good to
Yeah.
run with this thing?
Okay, medically, the brain is not developed to 25. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Maturity, mental skills, self-identity, that comes in critical thinking when you're looking at the scale of psychology, critical thinking, problem solving, and all those things, and contrast, and that's all the boring academia. Somewhere 16 to 18, they're just
Got
figuring
it.
themselves out. Now
Yeah.
the brain actually works the hardest in our life between puberty.
Really?
The brain works the most. The
Huh.
chemicals, no, that's when they sleep the most, right? That's why I
Got
always
it.
encourage kids in high school should be sleeping in and kids in elementary should get up earlier, right?
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
Right. It's a brain thing. So if we're
Yeah.
looking at this at a brain thing, then I strongly recommend that it's an individualized thing because there are people I would never give phones to, kids, because they're not getting the mental skills, security, and confidence at home from parents. This is becoming such a problem that it's it's not just causing addiction and lack of performance, Aaron. This is affecting students just at school and how they feel about themselves, and it's changing their athleticism. Like we have kids. I think I was talking to two different associations. This is the least I've ever seen globally kids signing up for sports. They don't want to.
Yeah.
That's a problem for development, especially Olympic development. 33% less girls. At 13, 70% of kids are quitting. At 16, another 34% are quitting because they don't have the skills or coping mechanisms to stay there. They want to stay there and play, but maybe it's their parents, maybe it's the coach, I've never seen this much cyberbullying in my life and teen bullying ever as I have until the last 4 years.
And that was another question I had about the bullying. Um, is the cyberbullying? Are we seeing any signs that it's sort of translating into just bullying in general at school, dress rooms, etc.?
I can't speak to every incident, but the ones that I see, yes.
Okay.
The bully in the cyber
Yeah.
teen app is usually the most insecure or wants the most
Sure.
control, right?
Yeah.
So, or they're mostly fearing someone else is better than them. That's usually the formula. So, what happens on the ice? The bully will not pass to that person or that person. And it translates because they're not mature enough to think, I got to win. We want to win. I'm going to pass to her and if she scores, we'll win. But they can't make this virtual world link to real world link. Everything begins and ends online.
Would an example of that potentially be, I'm on social media and I look at Larissa's feed, and Larissa seems to be leading this really great life, and her pictures are better, and her reels are better, or whatever. And I feel insecure. So when we get on the ice, I'm not going to pass to Larissa because of what I'm seeing online. Got it.
Right.
Crazy.
However, here's the cool thing that I've been sort of doing an article study on with a bunch of people you would know, but some OHL, junior A kind of players. Even Mike McInnes and I talked about this the other day. He's seeing it as well. Players are now just not playing hockey to play. They have friends in the stands to watch them hit someone, may it cause a fight, and stage a video on the ice. So we're forgetting to focus and play where everything is for a video and for a like, right? So even despite if it means us losing the game. And there's a dangerous path we have, and that's not safe. Safe sport, I'm hoping like we're trying to work with on several levels because it's not great in the dressing room, it's not great in the change room, it's not great on ice. This is not cool, right?
Yeah. Oh man, like,
Can you
if
imagine?
you again, well, you know what? Again, it's one of those things where if you had to just share that story about kids staging like things in sport or on the ice for likes, like 2 years ago, I would have said you're nuts, but I believe it today. I could that
And
makes
it's
sense to
happening
me.
more than I actually thought. Because now when I work with, like, anywhere from U14 tripping up, um, I'm finding it worse. It's worse when we first are giving kids phones, they're tending to try new things with their phones, and then by 18, they more or less understand how to behave on a phone, but they have to go through hard times to get there, and hard learning curves, like, with inappropriateness, photos, videos, like, the amount of stuff that I walk into on a team, I can't even say to you on here right now. It's a
Okay,
whole
so
other level of
me,
extortion and, right? Like, nudity and all that. Like, that's a whole we need a whole other podcast for that.
well, okay, so maybe we don't go down that rabbit hole entirely, but again, you and I had a conversation at our conference last year, and this really stuck with me because I think so much of the things that we read about phones has to do with social media. Like, um, but you brought up, and again, it's obvious now, it wasn't in the moment, but you said, when you're working with these athletes, two of the other big culprits are pornography and gambling.
Big 1 and 2. Number 1 and 2 problems for elite high
Those are number
school.
one and two.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Number 1 and 2.
And I was like, "Oh my god," like, and again, I'm like, "Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is." And to be clear, like, because I guess with phones, like, this is accessible to kids at younger and younger age. I've never been on a sports betting app in my life, but I'm sure it's probably like I had assumed that Tinder you had to be an adult. I'm sure there's kids have figured out the workarounds for
They
sports
can work
gambling too.
around anything. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You can have now Instagram has gone to an account where you have to put in your age. Well, they get someone else's identification. Like, right? So this is where it's really important,
It's a new
I would
fake
say.
ID.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's
I would love to see phones not have social media on them. Social media is the biggest culprit and the biggest destructive mechanism for kids, and videos. And when we didn't have those in society, we all were a lot happier, right? We were all happier, more confident, and we were more productive humans. Now kids think, "Oh, I gotta have my time, I gotta have my breaks," and even younger, people in the world who work in medicine or education, I'm seeing they're like, "Oh, I better not stay longer. It's 5, I better go." It's a heart patient, you can't just leave your patient, you gotta stay, and I've seen and heard where even they're leaving to go on breaks and watch social media. It's not just athletes. This is affecting all of us. But let's go back to gambling. Gambling and porn. Okay, pornography. I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Jay Harrison with the NHLPA. Do you know Jay?
familiar with the name, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Lovely, so smart, so funny, great. We had a discussion about pornography is the most addictive form of addiction, right? Highest
Like
reward,
like everything.
yeah, out of everything. Then gambling,
Really?
right?
Wow.
And this everyone in addiction with
Are we and we
neurology.
are we comparing this to like I don't know, like cigarettes and heroin and hard
No, in
drugs and stuff
terms of
like
addiction and what's on a phone.
got it,
What's
okay.
on Okay. So it would be up there with heroin actually, close.
Crazy.
Yeah. So because there's a reward system to it and a calming feeling, right? Like, so it's a stress thing. So they don't know how to cope and manage their stress. Let's go get a quick fix. Well, what this does is then it's more, and then we're changing our behavior to get it, right? And then you're staying up later and you're on your phones at times where your body should be rest, recuperation, and refocusing. So all of your major R's of your recovery are not going to be done. And our brains actually need more recovery now than our bodies because we're using tech. Tech uses the brain, right?
So it's almost like we're putting more kilometers on the odometer, or more miles on the odometer.
I just
Yeah,
had
yeah,
someone say that the other day, and that is a great metaphor and vision to use. We're putting more
yeah.
kilometers up here when we shouldn't. It should be in our bodies. We should be walking more, talking more, and our brains actually fight off Alzheimer's and all the neurological diseases when we talk and walk more, right? Now we just sit and we just scroll. But
Yeah.
gambling is a beast that I'm dealing with in sport across all sports, and it is very destructive, in fact more distracting than pornography right before you perform. because
It is that because you've got the lingering, you want to see the result.
correct, bingo. So
Yeah.
let's just say I've never been on a betting app and my children, they do football fantasy or whatever. That's about the limit I allow. But we're even discussing if we should be allowing that. Um, and I'm looking at it and they like want to see the reward. So they don't take their phones to school, right? In here in Ontario. So the first thing my kid did when he got home, he goes, I just did this and I made this. I'm like, because we didn't let him have a phone till the end here of grade 8, right? And he doesn't have data, he doesn't have anything. He can talk to his hockey players, his friends, and see videos from Daryl Belfry and a few guys and you. And he likes watching the videos off coaches. Like we designed his phone to make him feel good and to be productive. But then I take this to a junior a U16 AAA team, and they're all on their phones right before the games. And they literally will be on them until the whistle goes, until they go on the ice. And then you see missed pucks, bad passes. Really, they're not on the forecheck. And we see other behaviors coming from this. They're distracted. Oh, did I get that bet? Did I win? That was a lot of money. And this is happening across every level, like 16 and up I'm seeing, because you can put 10 apps on your phone and have a bookie app to manage all your other apps. Right?
Yeah.
So they're stressed, they lose, and then they get frustrated. So they go back on gambling to make them feel good. But then you're never going to really win in gambling. You're not going to win that often. So it's a completely horrible cycle for these guys and girls. Girls have been starting to bet more. Right? This is not
Well,
just
I think that's like the NFL, like is their like stated strategy is how they're attracting female fans is through fantasy and betting.
Yep. Yep. So it's all on the rise. And what it does is it destroys your first period. And then if you're going to go back on your phone and check again, it destroys your second.
How
So
many?
there's the
Sorry,
link.
I'm curious. So when you work with teams,
Yes.
and I think, I mean, we've sort of seen it. I mean, we've had people that have approached the coach. It's like it's a literal product that you can buy. It's like specific for the bus and or dressing room. It's like the little things you put your phone in. It's
Oh,
got the
you mean the
player's number.
phone
So they,
the phone slots, the little boxes
yeah,
and stuff. Yes, that is great.
exactly. So when you go work with teams today, how many teams and or coaches are allowing cell phones in the dressing room or in and around sort of the team environment?
If I'm working with them, they're away. I've already given them
But when
something.
you
But if I'm
start working with them, and I'm assuming that's one of the
they're
first things you ask.
allowed.
How many are still before you
Almost all of
intervene?
them,
How
they're allowed.
really?
Yeah. Even though it's been stressed through Ontario hockey here to be out of the rooms, I'm finding they're all still in there. So
Really?
imagine
Because
little boys like 14 and 12. They're not doing anything good on their phones, Aaron, in there. Let me tell you. Like, not the pictures that people show me.
it, yeah, I can only, yeah, it's and I think there's probably another conversation here around when it comes to the picture taking, etc. What kids are doing, like just a kid can destroy his life literally.
Mhm.
And as
And
we
I've
know,
had
like
girls who have lost scholarships and other sponsorships and NIL money over it, right?
I
Like,
believe it.
it's a whole other world.
So, we think about it in the sports context. I think that's maybe still evolving. What we have seen though is that I believe it was in Australia recently, they said no more phones in schools. I
Yes.
think the state of New York just instituted,
Yes,
I
they
want to
did.
say, is it maybe
Ontario did here.
France? Yeah. Is there enough, is there enough data with
Yes.
those examples to say, here's what happened when we took the phones out of the school system and how things changed?
From what I understand through a few people that I know in Australia, suspensions and classroom behavior conduct has decreased. Kids are starting to
For the
talk
better.
more and play better and talk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is where we learn through play faster in our brain than any way else. It actually is harder for our brain to read something and then learn from it rather than to learn through like watching your cool chemistry teacher do really cool chemistry experiments. And I learned from that really visually, right? For me to read about it, it was harder for my brain to grasp. So it's interesting because in our latest part of our research here with MGA, we are seeing that kids today are 40% more visual. they are not as auditory. Well, teachers and coaches need kids to be auditory, right? This is the bane of their existence right now because it's harder to talk to these kids. But some are saying in Ontario the kids are not as riled up, right? They're not as antsy. Now, then I have other teachers, but I'm wondering, does that teacher have behavioral managed strategies, and so that's why they can manage the kids better? Is it, or is it bad teachers just saying, right? Like you got to look at what we're isolating here. But overall, Australia has had great success, and suspensions, detentions, and things have gone down, right? But it's I'm just glad that we're doing it because it's like allowing them to go play poker and use cocaine all day. That's exactly what we're telling it. And the physicians don't want it. They don't want kids to use their phones to an excessive amount, but then you've got to control it. So how do we control it?
I thought about this as well, just in doing research. Is and again, self reflection. Like I realized that I had some issues with the phone, and that and it was just little things for me. Like I would start, like not to get personal, but it's like I didn't realize like whether I was going out for a walk. I'm like I wouldn't go out for a walk without listening to a podcast. I wouldn't go to the bathroom without my phone. It was just like it was just on me, and I'd be like, I'm not looking at social media, but I'm like, oh, but I've always got. It's to your analogy with like the brain. I was always
As soon
I
as it's
didn't
on us,
exist.
it raises our heart rate, right?
Yeah, I just had
Just
constantly
on
had
us.
inputs. And I know for me, so we've got this place in town here. Like I've gotten really into sort of the sauna cold plunge
Yes, yeah.
thing, and I try and go 3 days a week minimum. It's a huge part of my routine, and there's all sorts of science around
Yes, there is. Yeah.
the health benefits of it. But the one thing the health benefits don't talk about, which and it took me a while to clue into this, is so you show up with a bunch of strangers, you book your time in the sauna cold plunge, and you meet people. And I would come home and I talk to my wife, and every time she's like, "Oh, how was it?" I'm like, "Oh, it's great. I met like this person, and
Yeah,
they
you
do
get
this thing in
it's
town. Or
the
I met this
social.
person, and they
Is it
do."
the social?
And we don't have phones, and I was like, it took me like months, and finally, I'm like, you know what it is? We're sitting in there and we don't have phones, and it's either you start talking to people, and it feels good. You walk out of there and you feel like $1,000,000, and it's partly
Right?
probably got the COVID, but it's
Athletes aren't getting
incredible.
this.
Yeah.
That connection, because here's where the coolest thing about our brains is when we connect with somebody, like when I connect with like I was in Calgary with the Calgary Dynast, amazing organization. So when I'm out there, I'm like, you guys are all awesome. You guys are incredible. Like connection, talking, the discussions we had were very open and very constructive towards making the sport ecosystem better for young female athletes. It was very good. I really liked it, and I felt like that was worth it for me. And it was connection. We didn't have our phones. Now maybe when I sit down on the table, no one does, but at the table, if we have it with us, we tend to use it. But if we don't, the connection to an athlete brain is almost like life changing. When I talk to coaches about how to change their brains to help the athletes, self talk, how to stop negative self talk, how to use mantra work, practice their mental skills at night and the morning, all that stuff, they're like, Larissa, in 1 week, we have different kids. Because as we equip the kids with the tools to do it themselves, confidence goes up, discipline goes up, and then the routines that we give them and show them, they create them themselves. I never take away a phone, Aaron. I've never done it. Yet they get down to 2 hours a day.
Okay, so
Amazing,
I think
right?
this is a good segue, because I think that it's like a lot of things in life. Like all you hear is the negative aspects, and pretty soon we forget that there might actually be solutions to solving
There
some of
are.
these things. And what I
Yeah.
what I hope is going to happen, and again, as a father of a young person, is that the whole cell phone thing is going to kind of be like there was a time when people were convinced that smoking was good for you,
That's the
like
analogy I use. Yeah.
yeah, and everybody was smoking, and then it's like obviously science data, and it took time. All things take time, but today,
40
like
years
if you
actually.
socially, if you light up a cigarette, you're like looked at like what are you doing? And you used to be able to smoke on planes, which today seems just crazy.
Yeah.
So if we start, we're talking to a lot of coaches here. What might be the ABC, so to speak, for coaches to create some healthy boundaries and habits within their team when it comes to
All
cell
right.
phones?
Ready? 3 things we encourage all coaches to do with their teams and to get it right away set with their first part of their season with their parents. I have higher standards for my team and team behavior. I want to win. Of course, we want to win. But winning today takes more because we're in a digital age. We have another whole challenge, and phones bring us bad behavior, bad habits, and bad chemistry. So we have information that talks about that. So we tell coaches if they can get their athletes to go to bed in their rooms, no phones, an hour before bed, they will be better for you in practice automatically the next day. That's one. 2 hours
How
before
do they do? Is that just through conversation? Like, how do they? Because you got
your
to
your
trust. I
first
mean,
your first team meeting. These are our phone strategies, boys, for this season. Follow it,
yeah.
or if you're showing signs you're not earning your ice time, like I'm old school. If you don't earn your ice time, you're benched.
You have
Sorry.
a great line from and I wrote this down. It's from your talk
Oh,
last year,
if your
and
practice
it's
time is more than your
yeah.
screen, all right? Or if your screen time is more than your practice time, then don't complain about your playing time, right?
Yeah, if screen time is greater than your practice time, don't complain about your playing time, which I
And
think
I
is
can
I hope
say
everybody writes that down.
that's
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I have coaches that call me from your website and say, I would, like they're like, that's what got me is because I know these kids are on their phones 25 hours a week and they're only with me 2 or 3 hours a week. Right. And there's a difference. The other thing is 2 hours before a game and 2 hours before a practice, no phones. Study film, roll, work out, make your food, do your homework. Fill it with other things that you should be doing anyway, so you're not rushed after practice to do it,
So,
right?
would an example of this be, Larissa? Like, I think anybody that works around sports, where like
Yeah,
routines are so important, right? Play it how
vital.
players prepare. So, would it be like would part of the antidote be with coaches to say, hey, when your kids get to the rink, you have to almost design this social thing or something that doesn't include
Yep,
the phone. Like you've got to create you got to replace the habit, so to speak.
right. So I often see the coaches that we work with, they have the phone case. They're
Yeah.
gone. Focus on your game, start practicing your mental skills, do your visualization. What is your plan of attacks after each shift because you're using your bench time for brain time, right? We get each athlete to focus on that. So we actually encourage the coaches to, yes, let's go back to this. So no phones an hour before bed. No phones before practice or games. After games, we don't want them rushing to their phones, right? They're all going to run. Let me tell you, they all run to them. How did you do today? What did you do better that you didn't do as well as last day? And where do you still need to grow? If an athlete can be trained in their brain to always ask these questions, and after you've given their team talk, how did they do today? It actually makes this anticipation feeling, these chemicals, right? We're down dopamine, now we want it. So you know what, boys, I'm really proud of you. There's some things we need to work on next day. Did you do your own self analysis? What do you need to do next day? Think about this, please. And then let's be ready to freaking go to work the next day. That calms the brain. And they don't
Yeah.
want to antsy and go out. See, if they get yelled at, they'll run outside and go get their phone because their phone gives them dopamine and makes them happy. Right. But if
Yeah.
you can make them happy as a coach, they don't want to go to it.
Did you see this is a few weeks ago, AJ Brown, a receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, on the sidelines? He was reading, the camera caught him reading a book, but it blew up. He was reading this book, Inner Excellence, and I think so there was two parts to it. I think at first, it was the reaction that people like, what's he doing? He's not focusing on the sidelines. And then he
Yes,
was like,
it is.
no, like I was, and he exactly what you just said. He's like, I'm calming myself down, I'm staying focused. And he was reading a book about effectively sports psychology. And this is a habit he's developed. And I thought about that. I'm like, again, just going back to the point of coaches sort of creating that space is to create some good habits and saying, allowing players to maybe create the space, say, like, actually, all of you, I don't care if it's a comic book, I don't care if it's Calvin and Hobbes, you're all going to read a book when you come to the rink. And this is just part of our routine. And we got to flip the script a little bit.
We do. We do need to flip it back to what we know, what was working for our brains, because right now this isn't working for our brains. This isn't working for performance. So going back, and also the other thing I have coaches doing is put your plays in your playbook. Bring a book, do a tang, so that you can study the systems, Study where you need to be on the power play, because let's go back to kids are less auditory today. They're more visual, right? So give them a duotang of their mental skills, remind them of their goals, do their 10 visualization, and read this. It's a game book. Practice, look at your systems. Do you know where you are on the football field or on the ice? What are you doing? Can you see yourself? Because psychology says and behavior says if you can see yourself doing something in a visualization, your body can catch up to it faster if it sees it, right? So you're actually going to be forming a little bit faster than everybody else. And if you don't, your body lags a few seconds behind to get it,
Got it.
right? So that's why visualization is so powerful. And so today I asked them to make little videos of themselves, visualizations, the top 10 skills that they
And
have
when you say you make videos of themselves, you're saying mentally, not
mentally.
actually like
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
not doing
No,
TikTok
no,
videos here.
no,
Okay.
mentally,
Okay.
because they work off a scroll, like a scroll. Then they're like, I've even had kids going, well, I can't scroll this way in my brain. It doesn't work. Okay. Go with your skills. Like it's a video of like you're seeing on TikTok of yourself watching yourself in a video. I literally have to go that detailed. Because they have visualization can be very hard today to get them to see themselves. And then once they do, they're good. They're very good. Yeah. Yeah. But so JJ McCarthy from Michigan, right? He was quarterback, uses meditation. I have a lot of kids who use tapping, meditation, focus, but mostly it's about what do I want to do? Here's what I'm going to use my bench time for. Here's what my prep time is for. What are you doing? And they all go out and execute.
So I think what's really positive about conversations like these is that collectively we're all learning that these mental skills are no different than the skills like shooting, passing, and
No
skating.
different.
These are taught, these are learned, these are
Yep.
acquired things.
Yep.
At what age is it appropriate to introduce some of these mental skills to kids?
As early as possible. Like
Got it.
we learn it at 3 how to share, right? We learn at 3 how to meet
Great.
people.
Yeah, great example.
We learn at 3 how to, or 4, we got to stand in line in what do they call it? JK? They call it JK. Like I'm way
Yeah.
beyond that now.
That's an Ontario thing. We just
Like
we don't have them all
kindergarten?
that.
Is that
Yeah,
kindergarten
we
too?
just have
So
kindergarten out
we
here.
got to
Yeah.
stand in line. We got to wait our turn. That these
Yeah,
executive
habits. Yeah.
functioning
So
skills
it's a great
start
example.
early. Okay, you're angry right now. I know you want an ice cream, and I know I've said no. But we don't have time to get ice cream today. Do you think we could come back maybe next week and get an ice cream? Is that okay? Right? No, I don't ask permission. So I just say we're gonna come back next week. Right? Do you understand that? And get that acknowledgement. Like there's these little levels, little examples we can use. Right? Like, no, you're not going to get the most expensive goalie equipment. I can't afford. Like, right? There's all these conversations, but like that, they have to start earlier because kids are 2 to 3 years behind their age, Aaron, and don't have these skills. Right?
So you yeah. So you use these great examples here with parents, and one of the all time, and I think we obviously post a lot of things online, but one of the all time greatest lines is it's Ray Ferraro. It's a talk he did for us years and years ago,
Oh, right. Yeah.
and the line was basically like it was about like the amount that you allow your kids to play hockey. Like he was referencing sort of the overuse injuries that were occurring, and he's like, your kids want to have candy every day. It doesn't mean that you let them. And he's speaking to parents, and so in your bio on your website, you talk about your research into sort of parenting styles. So a coach could do everything right, and I think there's a lot of coaches that are listening to this and thinking, okay, like I'm going to do all the things that you just prescribed, but if the parents aren't on board, I'm still kind of fighting
You're
an uphill
still
battle.
challenged with what's going on at home, but here's where I argue. Let the parents manage it at home. But if they're on your time, they're on your time.
Sure. Got it.
This is
Okay. Your
your
time. I
value
like that.
system, right? They're on your time and you want to win. I want to win. I'm very competitive. I don't like losing. I'm prepared to lose, but I'll lose, right? And I'll take the ownership on my team when I lose any day. It's up to me. I'm the coach. So when I look at that and I think, no, you're my athletes. I know that this is the best educated way to train you and help you develop as an athlete today. This is really hurting 2/3 of their development, right? Remember that pie graph I put up? 1/3 is their potential, 1/3 is their mental skills, 1/3 is like their habits, discipline, and eating and sleeping and phone habits, right? That whole circle used to be white 30 years ago. Give or take little slivers. Now they're 1/3. Weaker mental skills, weaker habits. That is hurting athletes. So I say start earlier. I say we need to be more strict. Parents need to definitely be more strict at home. But as a coach, we're working with associations now to help the coaches get this under control on their time, because it's behavior that is their challenge. If they don't deal with this, actually, behavior will be worse.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, again, we touched on. I mean, you work with a cross section of
Yes,
teams, athletes, etc. But I mean, I just hear it in day to day conversations. Um, with particularly probably mostly in pro hockey, because unlike in the NCAA, kids are still going to school, they kind of have their days filled with them, but it's
they're still bad.
I'm hearing it from like I'm hearing a lot in like East when I talk to coaches and say the ECHL, AHL, those leagues where it's like they get young players
Yeah,
that again they only have them for a couple hours a day, but then they've got all this idle time, and it's
they're the
like
worst.
I've got buddies that coach in like some locations where I'm like, if I was in my early 20s, I'd love to be hanging out there every day. I can only imagine what I get up to. And they're like, we live in this beautiful spot. There's beaches, there's all this. And they just go back to their apartments and stare at their
Gaming,
phones all day.
gaming, or
Yeah.
hockey.
Gaming and yeah.
We haven't even
Yeah.
talked about gaming, but like that is the one. You're right, because they're not as exploratory children today. They're safe. They feel safer here on tech. But tech makes us and our brains get very angry very easily, and our bodies become lazy. We don't get the same like our metabolism overall. Someone was saying that everyone's metabolisms are changing. They're becoming slower because we're more sedentary. That's crazy.
That's wild. Have you this just came out, it's good timing. Last week there was an article in the Athletic, and it was talking about how in the NHL, like the social lubricant used to be alcohol. You'd finish a game, like guys would have beers on the plane. They'd go out for beers after. It wasn't uncommon. I think there's a comment in it from a veteran player that, they're all unnamed sources, but he said like the NHL used to. He goes, when I first joined the NHL, I had a veteran player that said, if you can't play hungover in this league, you can't be an NHL player. But it talked about how that's shifted to now players, when the game's done, they don't go hang out together at the bar. They go play video games and consume edibles.
I was just
It was
and
cannabis and
they
video
order
games.
their edibles to the hotel they're going to be at.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
and they
I
play
deal
video
with
games.
all of it. It's like, get off your phones, go play poker, go meet in a room together. Like, go hang out. Like, it builds you guys up.
Yeah,
Isolation is hurting sports. The
yeah.
personal isolation. Now, we all need time to ourselves. Yes, we do. Right? An hour to like stretch, maybe do some meditation, go to bed. Like, we all need our time just before. But now we're trained to be isolated, but it's not working in sports, especially a team sport, right?
Again, I think it's always important with these conversations because, again, just due to the internet, we can get overloaded with how half empty the glass is. But I think the thing that I hope everybody takes from this conversation, and I know that I have, is we talk about sports being a classroom for life, and I think that because of what's going on, sports has never been more important to get kids participating in sports, playing with other kids, just solely for the fact that it creates, when done right, it can force these social interactions in a really healthy way. And if we can educate coaches on how to create these boundaries, because again, it's a skill, and the path of least resistance is probably just to let the kids keep their phones, and it's just easier, right? No hard conversations,
However,
and
it'll be your hardest path in terms of development if you do,
yeah,
right? So we always say, is it fuel for development or is it fuel for a bad habit? So if it's fuel for development, then we got to use it, coaches. It's an edge. It's literally the only edge left in sport is the brain and behavior. That's it. We've done all the
yeah,
physical. We've tested it all, right?
yeah. Can you just, as we sort of wind down here, Larissa, can
Yeah.
you point to any success stories that would maybe illustrate the power of getting these habits under control?
Oh gosh. We have individual teams, Ohio State lacrosse. We've got Niagara U hockey team, men's OHL Rangers. I had a great talk with Calgary Flames. Ryan Huska and Cal McLean asked me to come, and they were like, this was so helpful. And I had so many of the guys ask me such really good tech questions at the end of it. Like, it was the players, they were very helpful, and I was like, try this, try this, try this, and each brain's different, so they're gonna like. But they were just like, wow, we need to start thinking about this on a larger scale, and it was really really great. On individual, right now we have the most drafts we've ever seen. U16 kids drafting to the OHL, and we have some kids drafting into the NHL, so that's great, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
For anybody that's listening to this and they want to connect with you and learn more, where can they find you?
Easy. Just Mental Game Academy at gmail.com, or basically go to the Mental Game Academy on Instagram. That's easiest. We're on LinkedIn under Larissa Mills. I'm excited because our new website is finally going to be done for next week. It's really highly video oriented and listening oriented, like auditory,
Yeah.
as well, because we're expanding into new courses and programs. But those are where you can find us. And we have different locations. So we have a US location too, a tag in Connecticut, but that's where you can find us, or the mentalgameacademy.ca is for now. And we're moving to mentalgameacademy.com. So that'll be our new website.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, listen, I think this is what excites me about this. I really believe that through education and by getting good information in the hands of leaders and the people that are mentoring kids, that 10 years from now we're going to look
It's
back and
different.
say that sports was
Yeah.
a catalyst for positive change, and that we're not going to live in a world.
No, we won't. We are
Um,
not.
yeah, and I, you know what, and I'll share this story because this was one that was really impactful for me. We take part in the World Championships, and I think sometimes we assume that this is everywhere. I think it's important to recognize that you know um, different parts of the world have different habits. So a couple of years ago, we're at the World Championships. It was hosted in Denmark. So we're in Copenhagen, and we're staying at this Airbnb, and we had to go to like the venue. We had to like kind of walk through the middle of town, get in the subway, go in the subway, go to the rink or hotel where all the events were. And it's a couple days in, and every time we'd make this walk in the morning, and I'd be looking around, and I'm like, there is something so different here, and I cannot put my finger on it, and it's dry. But I'm like, there's a different vibe and energy in this place. And there was this big town square that you kind of walk through, and it was about the third or fourth day it hit me. I'm like, we're walking through this town square. There's kids playing in the park. There's no parents around. There's parents on the kind of the exterior at cafes having coffee, talking. And I'm like, and it dawns on me, I'm like, oh my God, there's probably 1,000 people in this, in my eyes, from what I can see, nobody has a phone.
Denmark's
And just
very
the
good with it.
energy and everything they connect, it was palatable how powerful that was. So I think that's always thing I consider remind that this is, we create those environments that it does have an impact on ourselves, but just also I think just the quality of our life
Right. And
in
I
general.
think with what we're aiming to do in the next year is aim for phone free facilities, right? So phones, you might have them, but they're not out, because we want to be listening, watching, learning, right?
So are you talking about you walk into the rink and there's a big, like, kind of like the big circle at the cross where it says
Athletes
no phone?
specifically, like, right?
Okay. Amen. Let's go.
Right? Because phones are also causing other problems, like as parents and stands and video taking. And that's a whole other problem. But I think we just need to be more educated about it, more balanced, because let's face it, they're not going away. But I think it's going to be like what you said. You can't continually smoke, right? You can't. And you actually, they're saying phones can do more destructive damage over time, anxiety, depression, and they're isolating more kids. So I think we actually have more of a pandemic, a behavioral pandemic, than we have anything else.
Yeah, and I think it's like, sometimes the genie can't be put back in the bottle. Sometimes you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. In this case, I think we can.
I
I really think
absolutely.
we
I
can.
think there can be more
Yeah,
balance. But thank you
yeah.
for having me here today. And
Oh
if
man, you
coaches
rock,
need
Larissa.
anything, we'll help.
Okay, amazing, Larissa. I have a feeling we'll be having this conversation again, and it would be great to do so and talk about the progress that we've seen. But thanks so much for your time
Oh,
and everything
thank
that you're
you.
doing
Thank
for our
you.
community.
Thank you. Thank you.